Welcome to The State of Us. Real people with honest opinions and the future of responsible media. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
Thank you all for tuning in. We've got a great topic today, and it's actually a follow-up. Lance and I try to follow through on that. The U.S. contains 5% of the world's population, yet we house 25% of the world's incarcerated population. Now, this is not a new topic for us. As I mentioned, we've discussed it several times before. But get this, since the 1970s, our prison population has grown by 700%, Lance. 700%. Now, I don't know about you, but $48 billion a year, 700% increase, a recidivism rate of over 60% on average. Sounds to me like we've got a little bit of a problem.
Obviously have some issues we need to take a look at and try to find some solutions.
Yeah, we got to do something, I think. And you might, our listeners out there might say, I've never been incarcerated. I don't know anybody that's been incarcerated. So why do I care about this? Well, the angle that we took in the last program, and we're going to play a recap here in a moment, is basically to talk about we're facing a labor shortage in this country. And regardless of the fact that we're facing a labor shortage, we hopefully look at it as it's the right thing to do. We should be looking, I would think, at our criminal justice system as a rehabilitation program, a retraining program almost, because I don't think any of us want to look at it as just punishment and let's not try to make the world any better with it. If we can accomplish the task of preparing these individuals to contribute positively to society, then that's obviously what we're hoping to do. And today we've actually got somebody who's uniquely qualified to speak on this topic. Tulio, I really appreciate you joining us today. And can you give us a little background on yourself and what you're doing today?
Sure. Sounds great. So my name's Tulio Cardozo. Basically, I am one of those people that you're talking about that is coming back to society after being incarcerated. I spent 7 years in the correctional system, both in California in the state system and in the immigration system directly after, for about another 3.5. So, 50-50. Got an opportunity to see what that was like. But realistically, what is really interesting about it is I got an opportunity to develop myself as an individual through the rehabilitation programs that exist in our current incarceration system. Since then, I've been able to work in the technology industry for startups, for myself. I started my own company for a bit. And I've now most recently joined an organization that I used to be a client of, and now I'm a team member of, that is specifically focused on providing and teaching both business and technology training to incarcerated populations. And I want to say that I wish I had the opportunity to be involved in a program like this while I was incarcerated, but I didn't have access to these sorts of tools. So it's really meaningful for me to be able to get to be an individual for other people, like I sure as heck wish I had when I was serving my time.
I mentioned before that this is a follow-up to a previous episode that Lance and I did. We actually learned about the last mile through an article in the Wall Street Journal, where we discussed inmates who were learning to code, as well as high school students who were also learning to code, and some of these trade skills that were being taught where employers were looking to some areas like high school students and like current inmates and former inmates as an opportunity to help fill out their workforces, because they really, at the end of the day, they needed somebody who was qualified to do the job. They didn't care as much about who you were or what your background was, as long as you were willing to do the work and you knew how to do it. But before we move on, I'm going to play a recap of this. And before we get to that, Tulio, I wanted to ask, because Lance and I were talking about this before the show. We try to be good about, one of our things on this show is being respectful. And part of that is just respecting, how people prefer to be referred to, whatever people prefer to be called, or how we talk about things. So I wanted to ask with that, is there any specific terminology that the last mile or yourself advocate using as opposed to saying something like a former inmate or former felon or anything like that? Is there an alternative to that that's better, or does it matter?
Yeah, I think that the best alternative to it is just a formerly incarcerated person, because realistically speaking, that's all we are. I mean, we are people that made some mistakes, but we're still people. We're still parents. We're still brothers, sisters, family members. And, we just happen to be formerly incarcerated and we're doing something different in life now. So I would highly recommend formerly incarcerated person.
Okay. Good to know. I appreciate that because, everybody has to forgive. Lance and I say it all the time. We all make mistakes. And I think most of the time people don't mean it. Anything that they say that offends somebody or maybe isn't the right terminology, they don't mean it in a mean way. But any time that we can, take time to acknowledge that, I think it can be helpful, at least to avoiding us getting caught up on things in a conversation that we shouldn't have to. So without further ado, we're going to do a brief, it's about a 3-minute clip here of a recap of Lance and I's discussion from the previous episode, and then we'll get into talking about some more stuff. So listen in here, folks. Is there a real downside to the program that's occurring right now in Indiana? And what's happening is basically there's a company that's partnered with the criminal justice system in the state to help prepare inmates for various jobs that these companies need to fill. So they've kind of totally turned the whole concept of recruiting on its head and said, the labor shortage for us and the need for workers is so intense that we're going to go to a place that mainly other people don't go to in order to find people to fill these jobs because we want to stay in business. We're growing. We need people. And you know what? Just because they're inmates doesn't mean they don't have a future. So hats off from that standpoint. But what exactly is the merit of this? The program is called The Last Mile, and it aims to help inmates find work and stay out of prison once they are released. Researchers at Rand Corporation have found that inmates who participate in educational programs were 43% less likely to return to prison than inmates who didn't. Now, I don't know about what you think, Lance, but that's a pretty compelling statistic to me. 43%. Right. I mean, that's really significant.
No, it's like what people, it's like we always say, there is no one cure for all these problems, but when you can cut the recidivism rate almost in half, 43%, then obviously I think it's worthwhile for it to do that. And that's only part of it, just the education part. There's another piece of it I'm sure you're going to cover here that actually puts them out into the workforce if they are people who have those skills already. And so I think this is a fantastic point because, recidivism, it doesn't matter what decade you read about prison or prison reform, the recidivism rate is the one thing that we keep coming back to, that whether you punish them, no matter what you do, it seems like so many of them return to prison for multiple reasons. And that should be our key, is not that, we shouldn't want to house these people forever. Yes, there are some people within our society that we need to.
But most people, we shouldn't be looking at that way.
The large majority of people who serve time in prison could be contributing members of society if we just find a way to turn on the button in their head to make them feel that way, that they can be.
So this information is from August 29th in the Wall Street Journal. And speaking of recidivism, Indiana has a 37% recidivism rate within the first 3 years of release. And 75% of former inmates are unemployed 1 year after being released. So 3 out of every 4 people that get released are unemployed a year later. I think that pretty much does a reinforcing job of communicating what hopefully we've already laid out for you, which is there's definitely a problem. Because the reality is if you can't find a job, then you're probably going to turn to other means of survival, because that's human nature, is to survive. So that's definitely something we've got to address. And I know it's something The Last Mile is working on. And we'll talk a little bit more about the solution here in a minute. But Tulio, speak to us, if you will. Has this always been a problem, or is it a relatively new challenge? And what I'm talking about there, obviously, is this idea of the amount of people we have incarcerated and the recidivism rate.
Sure. So I think it's definitely always been a problem where the recidivism rate for people coming out of the United States is something that we really could do better solving. But, since the 70s, the amount of people that have been released is gone up or incarcerated rather, has gone up over 700%. And so what that really means is now we're getting more people released. And of those people that are getting released, if recidivism is, between 60 to 75% of them, 60% recidivism with people being unemployed, 3 out of 4, a year later, that's obviously a problem that is more recently becoming compounded. And it's unfortunately, like you said, it's human nature. You have to be able to pay bills. You have to be able to take care of family. Lots of those people, sure, are younger and they have less responsibilities that they need to own up to, but many people are older in life. So I think it's fair to say that this is a problem that's been there, but it's getting worse and worse as we go along since the 70s. All
right. Well, thanks for the recap there, because I think people understanding that it really isn't, it's all relative, I suppose, but it's new in the respect that we're talking about it more now. But at the same time, as Lance highlighted in that clip we had played, this is something that we've talked about before.
Tulio, do you think that more people are open to an idea like this than maybe they were in the past? How we go, I guess in my lifetime, we go through phases where, oh my gosh, these people have done something wrong, so they need to be punished. And I'm trying, I'm kind of going back to that 3 strikes and you're out thing in California, which, I don't know, I will say it, I guess, my opinion, was a total fiasco, because you had people who were committing really more nonviolent type of crimes that ended up being convicted for a longer period, forever. And it was like, then we come to something more like today, where it's like, hey, let's work with these people and let's try to help them come back into society, which is, I think, what our effort should be all the time. Do you see that now's a better time for something like this? Or do you think in that people are more open to it, society's more open to it? Or do you think that's still a building block that we have to, sorry for a horrible pun, a wall we still have to knock down with people, that, we should give these formerly incarcerated people a chance? You understand what I'm saying, what I'm asking? I mean, do you think this is a good time for this? Or do you think there's still a big pushback in society towards something like this, the retraining of individuals and getting them to join the workforce?
Yeah, I think, honestly, there's always going to be areas of the nation. There's always going to be people in the community that are going to be resistant to this idea. But I think overall, this is something that cuts across partisan lines. This is something that cuts across age groups. And this is something that in most industries, this makes a lot of sense. Like, this is a good time right now in society for people that are coming out of prisons to be given a second opportunity, or in some cases, maybe a third opportunity, because they got their second opportunity in the past. But it is a good time. Currently, if you possess marketable skills, if you have experience, and if you can frankly get the job done, the way that employers look at it, and I literally have had this exact word said to me, is, I don't care what you did. What I want to know about is what did you learn from it? How did you change? How did you grow from it? And can you do the job? And what I find is most employers are actually interested in people because they know they're not going to get somebody who's giving 70% of their effort, because they have families or they have things that their obligations or their mind is elsewhere. They're going to get a person that's coming back into society and has something to prove and is going to give them 110, 120%. And I think that, again, both from personal experience and from the experience that I have had working with other people that have been incarcerated and with employers that are excited to hire them, what they really want to know is if they can do the job, are they willing to take it? Because they've got these deficits in job openings that they need good and qualified people for. And they want to give somebody a chance that's a comeback story. And they want to give somebody a chance to be able to redeem themselves, to their families, and to show their own workforce. Like, hey, look at this guy who had to overcome all of these things to learn how to be in the seat next to you. And just look at like what a contributing member to society could be. It helps change stereotypes at a hyper local level inside of a company when you can look to the person next to you, know where they came from, and then be amazed that they actually may know something that they could even show you that you could do in your own day-to-day work skills. And, it's something that actually happens, especially in software development, but it's a common thing. And so right now is a really, it's a good time. There's so many people coming back, but on the other side of that coin, we need these programs that help teach people marketable skills. Making license plates is a skill that isn't going to go very far once somebody's released. Trade jobs are definitely great jobs. Very good to be able to get into a union and those kind of things, but they're not necessarily for everybody. And having the opportunity to be able to either be your own boss or at least understand technology is really well, because the other issue is we got a lot of people that are coming back to different areas of the country. And if perhaps your area doesn't have those kinds of jobs, it doesn't mean you can't actually get a job doing that in your area. You could be a remote employee. So it's a good time. There's a lot of companies available that would hire people. And I feel that the sentiment is, if you can do the job and you've honestly learned something from it and you can tangibly speak about it and demonstrate it and prove yourself, they're willing to give you an opportunity.
Yeah, very, very well stated. I'm glad to hear that. No, I was hoping that was the answer.
From my own experience, man, I've never had to fill out a job application, in the sense that I've gotten great jobs because of the positive feedback I've gotten from great employers. And I think that speaks volumes, because I'm serious. Since being released a little over 7 years ago, never had to fill out an application. And I've been gainfully employed every single day since 1 month after my release.
Obviously, I think the hope is that that can be the case for more formerly incarcerated people, because I'm sure that, as we know, obviously the stats tell us that that's not the case for a lot of them. But I know that's part of what you guys are working on to change. And we'll be talking about that here in a second. But before we do, Lance, tell us, one of our goals for last year was to follow through on some of the topics that were special coverage topics. And what I mean by that is Lance and I spend time discussing things on this program with guests and sometimes without guests that are, current event kind of things, politics, that sort of thing. But we also try to do a better job than other outlets at highlighting and bringing into the spotlight issues that people don't yet know about or don't know enough about or don't have the right information about. And in this case, Lance, I think it's all three. I think there's a lot of people who don't really think about this as being a serious challenge that we face as a nation. And then, there's a lot of misinformation as well.
Well, and know that there's a viable alternative. Right. That there's something out there that can really ease the problem and help everyone.
Yeah. It helps the incarcerated individuals. It helps businesses, right? And it helps the bottom line of the country.
Well, it helps all of us. If more people are out there working and paying taxes and buying products and
capitalism.
Exactly, right? I mean, this seems like a no-brainer for people to get behind, but I know we're going to talk more about that later.
So tell us a little bit about what TrueChat's mission is and why we're taking time to cover something like this.
Well, our mission is to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations. And hopefully we're doing that today, and we do it every day. But it's just to let people know. And I can think of so many different things that my tax dollars are spent on that I don't like it that they're spent on. I think it's a wasteful spending, but I can't think of anything that I would rather have them spent on, other than, and this is adult education, I guess, is more what we're talking about here, but this education where you can take people and give them a skill, something they want to learn to do or to be better and make them gainfully employed. I don't know how anybody, and I know they are, as Tulio said, there are people, no matter what you do, segments of society who may be somewhat pushed back against this, but this seems like a real no-brainer that you can take people and help them become gainfully employed and work next to them and break down some of those stereotypes and realize that they're no different than anybody else. And I think that's one of the biggest things we have to do in this world is we build up these ideas and stereotypes that we're different, and we're not. We all want the same things. You know, we were talking off air how, you know, taking care of elderly parents and raising two daughters and children. And, you know, it's just like, we all have the same goals. So let's all
buying vehicles.
Yeah. And, let's all work towards that. What's the big deal? So anyway, sorry, I don't get off my soapbox. Let's talk to the person who knows more about it than I do. And let's learn some more today.
No, it's good because we try to echo that. We're really trying. Lance and I work hard at making sure we're upholding that mission because it speaks a lot to what I think our particular program, the State of Us, is doing as part of this network and the network as a whole. So if you think that, you know, we're not doing a good job at that, we want to know. We are unlike other media in the respect that we want you to tell us. It's your job, those of you at home, to keep us accountable. And you do that by emailing ethics@truechat.org if you have any concerns with today's episode in regards to us upholding the mission. Now, we want to know. You're part of this conversation. We need your input. So at TrueChat.org, you know, did you know this was a problem? If you didn't, what are you learning today? Let us know that at TrueChat.org, social media, pretty much all social media. So let us know your thoughts, connect, and we'll get back to it here. So we were talking with, Tulio Cardozo, and he is a formerly incarcerated person and currently works with The Last Mile. And now we're going to shift to a little bit about the solution. I think we've done a good job of outlining, this is a problem. But let's talk about The Last Mile here for a second. And Tulio, what is The Last Mile, or how, I guess, is The Last Mile trying to solve these problems that we've discussed?
I think it's important to first say, first and foremost, The Last Mile is a nonprofit organization. And what we are really focused on is trying to solve the employment gap by providing education, experiences, feedback, and tools to people who are currently incarcerated so that they can come out and have a CV, have a resume, have experience, and be able to actually contribute on day one at an employer's workplace. Now, the thing that we're really focused on at the moment is rather than just providing these education programs in one state and trying to have as deep penetration as saturation as possible, we're really focused on now leveraging and expanding wide partnerships with multiple states so that we can really provide more people, especially for people in our communities that maybe don't feel like this is a good idea to be educating people who are incarcerated, let alone technology, and exposing more people in more states and in more communities to the benefits of teaching people who are incarcerated tangible work skills so that when they go home, when they go home, they can be those contributing members to society. They can be the neighbor that you want to move in next to your parents' house. Because every day in every community across the country, I guarantee you, somebody is getting out of jail, federal or state prison near you. And, you know, this is a real problem. And so the question becomes, who do you want them to be? And as a solution, what we are encouraging is let's have them be those people that can fill a demand for a technology work type of job, because you don't have to be a coder. You don't have to be, you can get into sales. You can get into support. You can get into lots of different things. There's so many different areas of tech that you can do. But what we're really focused on is helping to give people belief in themselves, give them exposure to what the possibilities are, because many people, I hate saying the statistic, and I'm not sure if this is the most up to date, but when I was incarcerated, I had heard this, the average education level for an incarcerated person is the 6th grade. Now, as a formerly incarcerated person, I feel like, man, that doesn't sound good. But how can you expect somebody who's potentially been in a neighborhood or in an area of the country where these opportunities didn't exist, so they don't know how to visualize this for themselves and for their own future? So really, we're trying to provide this education, in both business and technology as far and as wide as possible, because we think it's going to make more sense to the people that are going through our program that this is a viable opportunity should A, they choose to apply themselves, and B, they stick it out. And then also to teach the community members like how successful this is, because the one amazing stat that I don't think we've covered is, for example, right now we have had over 500 people go through our education programs. We're currently in our education programs. And of those, we've had over 50 returned citizens. And of those 50 returned citizens, we have had 0 recidivism, period. So I think what's important to communicate is those numbers are, they're amazing, but the numbers don't lie. If this makes sense, this is something that we should expand and we should grow to other states and really have deep penetration. But what we're really focused on doing is spreading it so that more people and more communities can see the benefit firsthand. They may have a loved one that went to prison or jail and they went through this program. And now they too could tell their local congressman, to tell their state representatives, to call their governors and ask for these kinds of things to be increased in their areas.
My next question is kind of rhetorical. I'm not sure that it's necessary because it's supposed to be. Is there evidence that your strategy is already working? And I think the answer, Lance, is a resounding yes, right?
Yes. And he kind of got into it, but my question was going to be, how can we and our listeners, what can we do to support this program? And, especially at our local level. And you said, talk to politicians. Is there anything that you can expand in that? I mean, is there anything that, because obviously it sounds very successful. What is it that if we're interested that we can do? Is there anything we can do on top of contacting our politicians in our state?
Sure.
How do we support the last mile?
So a couple of different ways to support the last mile. First and foremost, since we are a nonprofit, we always take donations if you want to just directly support us in what we're doing. And if you want to really become more involved yourself, I think one of the best things to do is educate not just yourself about the subject, but educate other people in your community, because spearheading the conversation and changing the narrative about what is possible is the first step. And I think that that's something that really needs to happen more and more inside of all of our homes, because when you come across an incarcerated person, you're going to immediately make some kind of a judgment call. It's just human nature, right? But if you can help educate other people about the potential in that person before that person is judged, whether inadvertently or for a specific reason by your other peers in your community, I think that's a really important part of it. But getting more specific, the other part of it is to work with local companies or your own employer and ask them, like, what could we do to support a program like this? Is there a way that we as a business can take our business, like whether we need a website or something of that nature, and have it built by people that are currently incarcerated? Something we didn't really chat about and is the last mile. Actually, not only are we educating people, but we are also providing a development shop. It's a company. TLM Works. We're the only company in the United States that has a development staff of 100% currently incarcerated people. These are people that are making a livable wage. Yes, they pay taxes. Yes, they pay room and board. Yes, they pay victims restitution. Yes, they have a bank account on the outside. Yes, they get to keep some of it to spend on things like coffee and whatever they need inside. But the more important thing is you as a productive member of society can take your business, you can take your needs and have them developed by people that are incarcerated. And that supports the very folks that need the experiences. That gives them your feedback. You can tell them, hey, we love the website, we don't love the website, or this is what we'd like to see. And that really helps to make the time that a person is incarcerated as productive as possible. Because I would say this on a personal level. Like, I believe that you need to practice being a contributing member to society while you're incarcerated. You need to practice being a contributing member of a company. I don't care if you're making bag lunches at 2:30 in the morning for 4,500 people at the chow hall or something like that in a prison. You just need to practice being responsible and doing something. And as an incarcerated person, but as people out in our communities, we can vote with our dollars, and we can ask companies like us to have these things built by people that are incarcerated. Now, that's another thing. Now, if you are potentially a very well-to-do citizen, where you just, for whatever reason, you have more opportunities available to you, we would love to partner with you or your business to potentially sponsor a program opening in your area or in your state, and work in a collaborative fashion with your local governments, with your governor's office, to bring the program. So if we currently do not offer our program in your state, and that is you, this is like one serious way that we can fast track opening up a last mile program in your state. And, we've had interesting conversations around this with people, and I can't really dive into too many specifics. But yeah, depending on where you fall in the gamut of just your own personal ability, opening the narrative around you with your community members is super, super important.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Cause Lance and I think not always, but every few weeks, Lance, right? We make a call to action, to our listeners when Lance and I have come up with a solution to a problem. I found us so often this last year saying the solutions exist. So many of the problems that we're facing as a country, it's not about, we have to find a new solution. It's no, we have the answer. It's just now a matter of implementing it or expanding the implementation of it. And we always refer people to contactingcongress.com. It's a super easy resource. You enter your address and it gives you a list, and the direct contact info for your representatives, in the government. But Tulio, if people want to, learn more, connect with the last mile, your website, social media, what's the best way for people to do that?
Sure. Come check our website out. It's thelastmile.org, or even better yet, go ahead and check us out on Twitter. We are very active, Facebook as well. And our Twitter handle is TLM. It's just those three letters, short for the last mile. And we're also on Facebook at the last mile. But yeah, just go ahead and visit our website. You can find links to everything else there as well. And if you are looking for an opportunity to join an organization like ourselves, we are expanding very rapidly, and we are looking for great people that are very motivated to contribute in this way. We're going to very likely double this year in our footprint across the country. So, we would love to have you visit our social media, have you visit our website, and if you want to be a member of our organization, reach out to us.
Great. We appreciate it. So again, the website one more time is thelastmile.org, thelastmile.org. Thanks, Tulio, for being on. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure to be able to contribute back to a society that contributed to me while I was incarcerated.
Yeah, we're looking forward to continuing this conversation in the future. I'm sure we will. You can find TrueChat Podcast everywhere that fine podcasts are found, like Lance, Apple Podcast, and
Spotify, Stitcher.
Oh, yeah. Okay. All the places. So make sure to check us out and get engaged, because we'll be bringing you more topics like this throughout 2019. For The State of Us on TrueChat in Urbana, Ohio, I'm Justin T. Weller.
And I'm Lance Jackson.
Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change.